Lisa Wessing, welcome to Psychedelics Today. Really excited to have you here.
Hello, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, so we're here to chat about Kiyumi, but before we jump in to learn more about the retreats, I would love to learn more about your journey. How did you get involved in psychedelics? Where did your interest begin? And yeah, I would love to just kind of hear your path.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my path has come it's in different ways. I guess I started with studying psychology, being very interested in the human mind and human soul as well. However, through my studies, I felt quite alienated actually from what I thought studying humans would be. And throughout my studies, I went to Mexico, where I ended up living for quite a few years, and I worked in a harm reduction program there, or a project, where I started, talking about different substances with people on a kind of eye to eye basis, and also doing drug checks. The nature of this kind of service also brings a lot of people who may have some, kind of challenging experience. And I started doing that. And that really got me into this, space holding and seeing the potential of what substances, specifically psychedelics, have. And that kind of brought me into wanting to work more, to learn more. At the same time, I was also doing my own experiences in ceremonial work while I was in Mexico, both with, traditional medicines and traditional contexts, and also recreational spaces. And that just got the ball rolling. And I started working as an assistant therapist in a center in Mexico that combines psychotherapy with traditional medicine work. And that kind of got everything more and more in, put everything in place. It kind of showed me what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. I guess that's kind of
What
the
type of
background.
medicines were you working with? In that?
Mainly ayahuasca, but also others, mushrooms, peyote. And it was mainly me learning, assisting, not providing at that point.
Yeah, yeah. You started this off with a kind of an interesting comment saying you felt alienated by studying psychology and how humans should be operating or whatnot. And I would love to just hear maybe a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm talking about a bachelor's studies at the beginning as well, and this is, quite simple work still. But I felt it was too much into statistics or kind of the cognitive behavioral system where humans like this, then we, put their thoughts into this and this line, and then they will have this and this behavior. And it just didn't feel like it actually matched with what I feel like as a human being or how I'd like to work with others.
Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Did you feel a shift when you did your master's?
Um, I felt, I mean, yes and no. My master's then was in Germany, and I felt that so I'm German, but I'd studied in more international or English speaking environments. And there, I actually felt like it was too hierarchical and I couldn't criticize the status quo enough. So that was difficult. I think mainly my shift wasn't so academically the change towards psychology. It was more learning through people who are putting psychology and psychotherapy into practice and then taking it kind of out of the book into the real world and saying, okay, yes, this is a therapeutic relationship and this is the space that has potential for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I just thought it was kind of like an interesting comment because I could feel that a lot of people probably feel that way, especially around just like behavioralism and just like
Mhm.
how clinical psychology operates with, yeah, just like looking at numbers and statistics. And obviously it's important for research and whatnot, but something something that came up as you were speaking was I always come back to something like James Hillman would say is that, the field of psychology has moved away from the study of its etymology, which is to study the soul, right? And just thinking
Hmm.
about bringing that human element back into it, then like, yeah, looking at just like, this animal body, we have behaviors, how do you modify it and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, really looking at somebody that has a soul, is a human, and how do we make that connection and that relationship? And that's where
Yeah,
the healing
absolutely.
is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely resonate with that.
yeah. So I'd love to hear about Kiyumi. What is it, and how did it get started?
Yeah, sure. So, Kiyumi it's called Kiyumi Collective. It's retreat program. We have different programs, and I'll get into those a bit later. But basically, it was created by my colleague Amit Ilan. It was envisioned through several years. It was actually his personal journey that he was looking to heal his Crohn's disease, also problematic substance use, and was going into his own medicine path. And through the medicines that he learned to kind of go into more of a holistic healing, body, mind, soul, where he believed that he'd like to not only work with psychedelics in a psychedelic context, but also bring a lot of other practices into the psychedelic context. So things like the somatic movement, dance, expression, artistic expression, mindfulness, contemplative studies, and also nature. And so Kiyumi started in 2019. It's holds retreats in the Netherlands, and since then we've created different modalities. So we have kind of the week-long retreat where we do preparation, a week-long retreat with psilocybin, so truffles, for with 2 ceremonies and lots of different things that we do in there, and then integration work afterwards. And then we've also created a more long-term program with Gabor Maté in association with Gabor Maté, where we do kind of two-way modality. We work online with workshops about how to prepare for the psychedelic experience, the mystical experience, community, somatics, and then also having the retreat where you work with compassionate inquiry, so Gabor Mate's practice, already with a group, and then with that same group, you've already who you've already connected with a little bit and started to kind of explore different issues, struggles, etc. And then you have also the retreat together. So this is kind of the creation of Kiyumi and also what we're doing in a nutshell.
Amazing, amazing. I'm loving to. I love to hear that like there's such a strong like somatic emphasis, and I was watching like I guess one of your intro kind of videos, and,
Yeah.
and really feeling that. And Amit said something that I said, and I was like, I really resonate with that. But he said the body is the portal, and I've been trying to say that as well for quite a while. It's like once we can kind of tap in there, we can go, I think, a deeper into our experiences. So that really resonated with me, and I was glad to hear kind of like he was taking that framework as well because I think it's really important for this type of work, and I think
Absolutely.
people are
Absolutely.
starting to become more interested in it, which is good.
Yeah. I mean, also being a dancer, yoga teacher, for him, it has been so important to have that somatic element, and also through working with his own body and the limitations that the his body has had, it has allowed him to really understand what the healing potential is to when it's really in here. Something yeah, it's like a domino effect. The mind and the soul can continue. I like, yeah, the body is the portal.
Yeah,
Love it.
beautiful. Beautiful. um, so I think we originally kind of came across Kiyumi because of the partnership that you guys have had with Gabor Maté, and I wonder how that started to develop. I
Yeah.
remember seeing the program. I was like, "Ah, this looks so cool."
Yeah. So again, Amit, when he was working with different plant medicines, he came across Gabor Maté not only through books like When the Body Says No, of course, and his personal journey, but also plant medicine. And in I think it was in 2015, not sure exactly which year, but where he participated in one of Gabor Mate's medicine journeys in Mexico. So they met personally, were able to, well, he was able to do his own process, but then also envision something that could be a collaboration. And yeah, that's how it kind of started, at least the seed. And then many conversations about what this would look like. How could compassionate inquiry and Kiyumi meet and co-create?
Amazing. I don't know if you're willing to speak about compassionate inquiry, but for those that don't really know too much about it, could you do like a quick little overview if you know much about it?
Yeah, I actually also certified last year,
Oh,
so it's
congrats. Nice.
yeah, it's been a really interesting journey for myself in the training, the compassion inquiry training, which is uh, a year long. Basically, essentially, I would call it a body based talk therapy. It's an approach or methodology that allows you to bring a person or also yourself, because it's also possibility for self-inquiry, to realize that whatever's happening to you today is a filter from past experiences, and that these past experiences are locked in the body through bodily sensation and emotion, and that these get triggered in the day-to-day conflict, struggles, or whatever, and that through being able to go back to the actual root sensation and traveling back in time within oneself to say, oh, well, actually, this sensation comes from a moment where I needed something and my mom wasn't there, for instance, and that gets repeated and played back to me again and again today when something similar, neglect, abandonment, etc., gets triggered in me. So this is kind of how compassionate inquiry works, allowing the facilitation of a person's in self-inquiry with mindfulness, with somatic techniques.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And do you guys incorporate this into any of your retreats, or is it just within that program?
So we have various of our facilitators that are CI certified. So it does kind of influence people's works, and in the end, each facilitator will always bring in a little bit of their own. In the program, more so because it is focused on that, and
Right.
also the participants learn the process and so are able to use it themselves, and we can support that. Um, but I think also compassionate inquiry with that somatic element is just something that is really helpful anywhere, whether it's in a
Yeah.
retreat or outside, to kind of understand what's a sensation, what's an emotion, and what's a perception is just really essential.
Yeah. I always keep saying that I feel like our culture is pretty like somatically illiterate, and I wonder
Mhm.
if you kind of find that to be true as well.
Yeah, I mean, in my own experience, I feel it took me a long time until I actually really understood what was happening inside of me, and how I could interpret that, and how much value and importance that actually has in my understanding. I felt like I was kind of living in my head for a long time, and it felt like the idea of myself, like not just myself, but the self, that it was resting in the head. And since, yeah, more somatic practices and also CI, where it was really clearly worked on, my 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 sense of self has become my entire body.
And what was that journey like to, I guess, start to learn more about like sensations, the body? Because it's interesting. Like, I've had clients just like be like, or ask them, what's going on? What do you notice in your body? And usually people are like, nothing, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't feel anything. And it does take a little bit to develop a relationship with that and also maybe trust it too, which I think can be really scary for a lot of folks. Like, ooh, I'm feeling this feeling, I'm having this emotional response, but do I trust that? Do I know if it's real or not? Right. And, I think since we're not very kind of somatically oriented as a culture, it's very new for folks. It could be a
Yeah.
real big challenge.
I think a lot of people will immediately think of this kind of idea of intuition and almost more like going into something esoteric, where the idea of gut feeling has been, yeah, really not appreciated. And so when we go into the body and then respond to our gut response or our just physical response, it seems as if we're impulsive, not rational. Baseless almost. I think that's kind of the general consensus, not consensus, but more like the general viewpoint. I think with my personal journey, it's been sometimes overwhelming. I guess sometimes just kind of feeling all the feels and
Yeah.
thinking, what is that then? Um, For me, practices like Vipassana have been really helpful to understand, to really go into all these different feelings and understand that they're transient, that they're very helpful, but they're also transient. So it means that something can well up, I can interpret it, but then I can also let it go, or hopefully let it go.
Yeah, I think that's the practice, right? Is being
Yeah,
able to, stick with it and let it pass,
yeah,
which
exactly.
is a challenge. Which is a
Yeah, and I see
challenge.
it also in my personal practice with clients in general. This practice effect of when I first start asking, what do you feel? Where is that sensation? What's the quality of the sensation? At first, the vocabulary is very simple. It's like good, bad, kind of value judgment, not so much qualities yet. And it takes months or longer to really get somewhere of like, oh, this is hollow, constricted, or, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And for those that are listening, maybe just taking a moment to tune in and
Hmm.
what are you feeling right now, right? And if you don't feel anything, start with a sensation, right? It could be a buzzing feeling, could be just a restricted feeling, something that feels tense. Maybe it's warmth. Maybe there's a good feeling in your body somewhere, and just learning to start developing a relationship with that, and seeing if you can go deeper into it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
become
quite like
curious.
also practices that just allow a kind of a state change in the body. So, for instance, just feeling whatever is, and then something like raising your arms for 30 seconds and then letting them go down and see, can I now see, feel a change? Or shaking one hand and leaving the other one still, and then having a kind of difference. Okay, this one feels in this way and this one feels another way, and you kind of learn learn how to actually feel the body through these kind of things.
Yeah. Why do you think it is that we've been so cut off from the body?
I mean, if the first thing would be kind of Descartes' philosophy, the rationalism, our kind of very Western philosophy that has been pushed upon the world for so long, in which the mind is seen as better. The mind is seen as it's mind over matter. We have so many different
Right,
ways of
right.
saying it, that the body is primitive, or yeah, yeah, mainly that's that primitivism, that I think we've been moving away from it so much, and also overstepping it so much.
Makes me wonder if that hasn't been like our paradigm that we've been, swimming in. If we would be interacting so differently, right? Like, would we be living in the mind if Descartes didn't kind of like put that out into the world, right? Because we have been just swimming in this Newtonian Cartesian paradigm for how long? And it's like, I wonder if that wasn't kind of where we were living most of the time. Like, would we have been living in our bodies a little bit more? And what would that even be like to not live in the mind as much?
Well, I mean, I guess it would be looking to different cultures around the world, seeing their understanding of body and mind, and whether there is, an actual difference for them. For me, it's harder to say because, yes, I'm very much part of the Western culture. Where, from my personal experience, where I've seen it most is seeing kids. So I also worked as a kindergarten teacher, and so working with kids of 1.5 to 2.5. So there's still quite a little, not so much of an imprint of society at that point, even from their parents. 1.5, 2.5 is, yeah, very small. And how kids interact with themselves and amongst each other. There, I think there's a lot more of an embodied practice
Mm,
just naturally.
yeah, yeah. Just the way they move and they play, and
Yeah.
not so much thinking and involved,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was just at in Poland with some friends, and we were families and friends coming together. We were in tents, and in the morning, I heard a child wake up, and I was thinking about this. When a child wakes up and is kind of grumpy, they all have that same kind of whiny tone, and it's this indication of like, oh, I don't know what to do with this world right now. Like, I'm becoming conscious in this something in this body, and I'm hungry and I don't really know. And every kid has that, this kind of like,
I feel like I still have that when I wake up in the
yeah,
morning.
yeah, yeah. And I think we can all kind of empathize with that kind of like coming to be in the world, and for a little child to kind of react to that within the body. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought of that right now in this
Yeah, it's really
conversation.
interesting. Really interesting. Yeah. Um, I'm curious to just yeah, get some of your perspectives around like to kind of go back to retreats and psychedelic facilitation, like integrating somatics into this. And I want to hear maybe a little bit more about the approach that you guys take at Kiyumi, and how do you facilitate? What do the groups look like? And kind of what's
Hmm.
the framework there that you guys
Yeah,
are
thank
leaning
you.
on?
So at Kiyumi, we generally work in a way that we do preparation already online with each participant. Each participant will be allocated a facilitator. So we have groups of 15 participants with 4 facilitators. And that facilitator that you do preparation with, you will also do check ins throughout the retreat and then also afterwards. So you have this kind of continuous process with one facilitator, and you can have a bit of a more of a deep dive. Even though during the retreat, you can obviously check in with whatever facilitator you'd like if there's, an affinity that is created. So, as I said, we have 2 ceremonies, and on each day, we will have a morning practice. And each morning practice is already associated to what is happening on that day. So, for ceremony days, we generally have gentle practices that give the participants tools for the journey. So, we will go into breath, embodiment, just kind of also release practices so that each participant can kind of create a toolbox uh, for the journey. And then also on integration days, we try to go into expression. Kiyumi is quite what something really important is expression, self-expression, and expression in community. So seeing and being seen is something also that we value, and that seeing and being seen can create awkwardness
Yeah.
and strangeness, and it's something that we, really like to also go into. Because once we break through that awkwardness, there's so much potential of creativity amongst the people. So, our workshops and practices generally are connected to our four pillars. So, there we have and the embodiment, nature, mindfulness, and art. And art can be many different expressions, of course. And we try to always include these pillars in our retreats so that each participant can kind of play with these different modalities. And here I also say play. I think play is also really important in our approach. So a lot of people come to Kiyumi and come to psychedelic work to work on childhood wounds and to be able to work on these wounds, I think, and also we in Kiyumi think, is to connect with that child. And connecting with that child means sometimes holding that child in your arms and by the hand to say, it's all right now.
Yeah.
And at other times, it's let's goof around and let's make funny noises and let's sing. Let's be on the ground and move in ways I wouldn't be moving. Um, yeah, so that playful element is really important. And also another aspect of Kiyumi, and that was part of Amit's vision, is giving space to many different types of people. So being very inclusive, and this idea of queering psychedelics, giving queer community more space also within psychedelic context, and also allowing a space for resonance for many different types of people. Their issues, their struggles, but also their happiness, and having a team that can um, not only empathize, but come from a lived experience and give space to, yeah, the diversity that people are.
Beautiful, beautiful. As you were saying, kind of like, inviting play in, maybe being able to like make sounds. Are you guys also taking a little bit of an inner directed approach? And then how do you, I guess, like manage the group if people are being a little bit more vocal and playing and moving
Mhm.
and whatnot?
So I guess it depends in which context you're asking how we need to, manage the group. Since we give different spaces, so different workshops or practices in which we may start, really slow into movement and maybe even with eye shades, so that you can kind of get into movement before you feel judged by someone else, and then also getting more excited and really maybe tiring people out because they're not used to moving about that much. We will kind of guide these kind of experiences, and but these are more in a workshop context. In the journey itself, I guess the motto is everything's welcome. So whatever comes up is comes up, and we don't try to say, okay, this much laughing is all right, or, you can just cry, but you can't do this. So we hope to give as much space as needed. In a group context, obviously, that can be, that can ruffle feathers. Maybe the person next to you is more vocal or more moving than you may want to. Um, One of the things that we then work with is, first of all, curiosity, curiosity around your triggers. What happens when I get irritated by the person next to me? What is that about me? And what can I do about that, or, feel into it? And then also, in a way, kind of supporting people in sometimes having a walker outside, or we'll also have a special, like a kind of, we call it the healing room, a separate room in which some acting out or discharge may want to arise that is not so, let's say, useful in a group context. However, we also don't want to, say, "Oh, this is too much. You're too much." and isolate people because of it. Because yeah, in a group context, many things happen. So that dynamic, that energy is also really important. I guess it's a balance and
Yeah, I was gonna
intuitive.
say it must feel like a fine balance, right? Of like
Ye-
really holding that to let people like fully express if they need to, but then
Yeah,
like not shutting their process down, and then
yeah,
yeah, trying to
exactly.
have people to bring all that stuff inside. Because I've been in groups, yeah, where people like they get really triggered, and our thing is like bring that inside, stick with that, like if you're frustrated, can you stick with that frustration? But it works really great with breath work. And then sometimes I've been in those circles with psychedelics where it's like really triggering somebody, and it's like is that why we keep quiet and more inner directed? So it's like really interesting to just kind of hear how you guys are approaching it. And I
Yeah.
wonder, like, any challenges with that. Have you like
I mean, there can be so many different challenges,
yeah.
that's it's not one that comes to mind right now. I guess it's the fostering of like allowing discomfort, that is just generally important in this kind of work and in self work itself. I mean, I now kind of broadly say we live in contexts in which it's all about escaping the discomfort. We want to have really comfortable home and a great job, and our vacation has to be as most comfortable as possible. And also in medicine, it's better to take just a pill that will do the job for me. And so psychedelic work is often really uncomfortable, and so it can also, that the group process reflects that discomfort. And so I guess one of the main missions and one of the main challenges is to present that, like, yes, you will be like uncomfortable, and let's work with that.
Mm. It's interesting. I just this is probably just at the forefront of my mind because I'm just kind of like working on some projects around this, but it almost sounds like sometimes when we go into psychedelic retreats or doing any sort of inner work, it's like really focused on the shadow, right? Like going into the shadow, really trying to, you know, heal from like these past wounds, and then hearing about some of this more playfulness, this expression, the art, the body, that kind of gets into the golden shadow.
Mm,
And how do we, which is really hard to embody for a lot of people, and especially from a somatic perspective. If you grew up in a very hypervigilant kind of or an environment that made you really hypervigilant, right? Actually calming down, being present is really hard. Or maybe you grew up in an environment where you couldn't accept yourself or you couldn't show expression, right? So actually leaning into that stuff can actually be just as challenging as going into the darkness. And I feel like sometimes it might be easier to go in the darkness, right? Like, how many times do we really just spend in our head ruminating on things and just like thinking worst case scenarios versus like really embodying more of this like golden shadow archetype? And I found actually in some of my ketamine work that it was coming up very often, where people had a hard time feeling love, feeling
mm-hmm,
pleasure, feeling
mm-hmm.
that I can just be okay, right? Because it's always like, oh no, I need to go deep. I need to go deep. And it's like this fine balance. Going deep is important, but also how do we slowly integrate these parts of ourselves that we have a hard time accepting, being with, expressing?
Yeah, so many things come to mind right now. So first of all, yes. I mean, the amount of times we have participants and they come out of ceremony and they say, it was amazing, but, you know, like, is that wrong? Like,
Yeah.
this idea of, if something's positive, it's spiritual bypassing. I think that there's that kind of issue coming up a lot. It's the being able to accept that things can be, beautiful, and I think that's really important to support. And it kind of relates to your question before as well, the what challenges in a group context. Um, I guess at first, when people would start giggling and laughing in the group, I didn't really know what to do with that. as well at myself. I think, it's like, oh, wow, it's beautiful. Someone's joyful. But then when suddenly half the group starts laughing really hard, then I kind of thought, oh, is this now going to trigger people who are in a different process? Or, um, how can I support and hold that kind of environment? Whereas if someone's crying, I'm like, that's fine. That's part of it, and I can be there.
Yeah.
Whereas the laughter really kind of shook me at first, and that was surprising to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I asked that question around like kind of holding that, I specifically thought about one person in a group. I mean, they were just laughing and laughing and laughing. We had multiple people say like, "Can you?" And these are like actual like participants of like, "Can you tell him to like stop
Yeah.
laughing as much?" And it's that fine balance of like, as a facilitator and managing that group energy and dynamics, like, do you shut somebody's process down? Do you let them, fully express it and be with it? And then, how do you get people to maybe like, again, go inward and maybe sit with that frustration, sit with whatever's coming up. Maybe it's like, I can't ever laugh, right? Maybe I'm pissed at this person because I can't feel that, right? I feel guilty about feeling that. But I'm wondering, as a facilitator, what are you doing for yourself to like manage to kind of, because I'm sure, that example, it's like you kind of got triggered, right? Should I
Yeah.
go do something? Like, how do you work with that for
Um,
yourself?
I mean, I guess it has different stages. There's the in the moment where I I need to act or not act. I guess there's also the
Yeah.
non-doing aspect of not always actually acting on my impulse and trigger at that moment. And then also reflection after journeying, for myself and in my team. I think it's really important also to reflect amongst my team to see, what did you feel? What did you want to do or not want to do? Or what came up for you? And that's always been really helpful. But I guess in the moment, there's a lot of in like the intuitive, and also allowing processes to unfold, not always having to intervene. So it's I guess non-directive holding. So if the issues arise, yes, of course I will, work on them. But something like that, I felt like I just had to, work with my trigger at that moment instead of having to change something in the outside.
Yeah. Which I think is like really hard to do for some
Yeah.
folks, right? And it takes a lot of like self awareness and practice. And I'm just thinking about one particular breathwork thing that Joe and I were doing. There was somebody that was verbally singing a song over and over again. And in that context, I'm like, this verbalization to this degree might be pulling people out of their experience. So it was like the one time I thought like, I need to shut this person up,
Mhm.
or not, just tell them
Yeah.
to not
Calm
use the
down.
same, yeah,
Yeah.
that same word repetitively. Like you can sing, but just like maybe not think about using that word that it could pull somebody out. And, you brought up a good point about like bouncing ideas off of people. I felt like my own sensations of like, I want to make sure everybody's having a great time. I need to make sure the group is okay. So sitting with that's where this is coming from, right? Like, oh, I want to have this person
Mhm.
not pull other people out, so I want to go in and intervene and tell them to not use that word constantly, and checking in and this is why I think like group work's important, and having like a good team is so you can check in. And
Mhm.
we discussed, and we said, let's just let it ride.
Mhm.
There's I'm just noticing my own, like, I need to, make sure everybody's having a quote unquote good time. I don't want to be disruptive. And then during the group share, I mean, nobody nobody said anything about it, and some folks actually said that was really great. It activated this process within me, and like,
Yeah.
I really needed that. And so
Yeah.
it's like we never really know.
Yeah, that's true. How people, that's why I love sharing circles. It's kind of like the prize for me as a facilitator to then really understand what was going on and all the
Yeah,
different perspectives of what happened, where we were all in the same room, but so many different stories. But I wanted to, say, I guess one way as well is to create, to do space holding is also means that there's already agreements previously. So it's really important to communicate what kind of space we are co-creating. So you brought up the verbal aspect, and we actually try to keep a nonverbal space throughout the journey anyway. And if there is a need, people can check in with a facilitator, and we might, just go outside to keep that nonverbal space inside. So sounds are great in
yeah,
all
yeah.
their forms. But yeah, going into that verbal, for instance, is already previously agreed with the participants as well that it'll be like that.
Yeah, yeah. Do you find that the reason why you made that agreement is that it pulls people out of their experience when there's too much, or the participant themselves are just too much in their mind and trying to verbalize it may take them out of more of a deeper process?
Yeah, I mean, both. I think it's the, I mean, again, broad sweeping
Yeah,
statement, but people tend to be in their mind, and that's why they're also in that setting, in working with psychedelics. So to have that more of an agreement, this will be a nonverbal space, just allows people to concentrate on other things mainly. And then, yes, of course, we will talk. We will never say you're not allowed to express yourself in that way. But just to give less emphasis on that narrative, on the interpretation of what's going on, and already trying to like kind of make it something in that moment.
right. Yeah, I think talking's helpful towards the end, right? Like during that integration, but how do you really stick with the process? And you said in the beginning that you guys also focus on art. Do you do any sort of like integration with art? Like in breathwork, we usually do a mandala where somebody still sticks in their process and they go put it down before actually starting to verbalize. Um,
Yeah, so we don't do it as close to the actual journey as in holotropic breathwork. However, on integration days, we do also work with art. So, depending also on which facilitators are in the retreat. So, we have a relatively large team, and we always try to have someone who works with the body, someone who works with song, someone who psychologist, psychiatrist, psychotherapist. Um, and so it depends. We don't always have the same kind of artistic offering, but definitely working with the hands. Sometimes it's clay, sometimes it's
ooh, nice.
paint, kind of, and then also working together. So, kind of producing something and maybe then showing the others and having input and kind of engagement with the artistic process.
Cool, cool. Have you guys ever done any sort of like soul collage before? I mean, I know that's kind of big in the psychedelic world as well.
The term soul collage, I'm not sure what that is actually.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in it, but I know like Hylia Taylor, I think helps to run that organization. And I think originally came across it with Michael and Annie Mythoffer. They were explaining it
Okay.
to me years ago, back in like, I don't know, it's like 2014 or something like that. But essentially, you get like a cardboard card, and it's almost like collaging in a sense.
Yeah.
And I think you're kind of putting down some sort of expression of who you are on this card.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I actually really like collage in general because when we say, okay, so now we're going to have an art workshop, so many people recoil and immediately say,
yeah.
I am not an artist. I cannot draw. I cannot. And so collage just kind of means, okay, let's cut some things out and stick it on a paper, and it's already something, and then you might add on as well with other materials. So, yeah, collage processes are great to Yeah, show people that they can be an artist, that they are artists as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people get hung up on art, which is like really
Yeah.
interesting. And I know myself, I'm like, oh, this is not going to be great or whatnot. And maybe it comes back to like that expression, right? Of like just being able to express yourself. And there's some vulnerability there to
Yeah,
put
totally.
things down on paper and, whether it's like drawing or collage or whatnot. Like, I think there is that maybe like vulnerability and fear of like putting something down and showing it to the
Hmm.
world.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Something that comes from inside to the out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So, I see that we're kind of getting at time here, and we talked about like the group space, the facilitation. So, I'm wondering, how do you guys approach integration? How do you work with clients afterwards? And
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, we already it's during the retreat, integration is already really important. So we do these different workshops so that people see different modalities in which integration can happen, whether it's through the body or art, etc. Also, we have journaling workshops, things like that, and we give a lot of tips and support already throughout the retreat so that also once people leave, they're not completely left alone. The community aspect is really important for us as well. So we put a lot of emphasis on that the people continue to, to mix, to share in the days, weeks afterwards. And then, as I said beforehand, the one-on-one facilitator will have a check-in with their participants in the week to 10 days after the retreat, where things can be kind of talked about. Okay, what's the process? The afterglow is still there, but where are the challenges? And then also having another group process after about a month and a half, so that people can see each other and then also share about what may have been more difficult than they expected. Because at first, people are kind of like, I'm going to change
yeah,
everything. And then life happens again. So, yeah, that kind of group support is really important. I kind of endearingly call it the Kiyumíty that we try to build with all the like, Kiyumi keys kind of getting together. And beyond that, we also have another integration program that is kind of a drop in once a month for all the alumni. So there
oh,
they kind of come
nice.
together and drop in with different themes where different themes are explored. And currently we're working on another program that's kind of like a 3-month program that will also offer soon. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's great to hear that you constantly are continuing to have some touch points because I know that's really difficult for a lot of people post retreat. Like,
Hmm.
they come together, they open up like with people, and it's like I don't know how many times I've heard it's like I feel like, people know me, but I've met these complete strangers that I feel like you guys know me better than sometimes my family knows me,
Hmm.
right? And it's like you create such strong bonds, and then you go your separate ways. And yeah, continuing that connection is really important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think also one of the main, the one really important aspect of integration is that people understand that it's not that now we're not gonna, make mistakes or repeat bad habits, patterns, etc. But it's about how we treat ourselves while we're doing that. And I think with that kind of in the community and people sharing, there's that support, that positive support that's like, okay, yeah, okay, you did that again, but that's all right, we really like to foster.
and I guess like personally, how do you view integration? Like, do you have like a framework or a philosophy around it? Like, what
Mm,
is it to you?
I mean, I quite like this idea of, I think it's from the presence process. It's not about feeling better; it's about getting better at feeling. So, kind of coming back to what we were talking about before of understanding our sensations, being able to be there, and then also letting them go. And I think that's kind of what integration is about: going into the different bodies of the mind, the soul, the body, the
Mm,
spiritual body. Um, and yeah, understanding ourselves in each one a bit more.
All right, everybody. As mentioned in the intro, this is about where the audio has cut out on Lisa's end. So I just want to give a huge thanks to Lisa for coming on the show and talking about the amazing work that they're doing at Kiyumí. You can check out more of Kiyumí's retreats and their upcoming retreats at kiyumi.org. It's KIYUMI.org. And if you want to check out our upcoming retreat, so we're hosting a vital retreat with them, that is coming up on September 6th. I think it's the 6th through the 11th, and that is going to be in the Netherlands. If you want to learn more about any of our upcoming retreats, offerings, you can check that out at psycholicstoday.com/events. We're really excited to be hosting this retreat with Kiyumí in the Netherlands for our vital training program. So students will get an experience with psilocybin and then also sitting. So if this is something that you're interested in, to have this experience sitting, this would be a really great opportunity to check this out. It's a really interesting model to be with. And, we've heard back from some folks that have been in retreats where everybody is just under the influence of the medicine, and then going to a retreat where you have this sitting component. And, there is something really kind of profound and healing that happens when you get to be there with somebody else through their experience. So we're kind of using that model for our retreats. So if you want to check that out, again, you could check that out at psycholicstoday.com/events and go down to the Kiyumí retreat and vital training in the Netherlands. So thank you again, Lisa, for coming on the show, and sorry about this little tech hiccup at the end here and not being able to recover the audio. So I think that is it, everybody. Thank you so much.